Great, so we'll get started. I know that we appreciate you guys hanging in there this afternoon. We're actually going to kick off with the Commercial and Business Committee. And for that, I'm going to ask Laurent, who is one of the chairs, to just talk about the committee. And I'm going to go through the, each of the gentlemen here, and then we're going to circle back and ask them some questions.
Okay, good afternoon. So I'm just going to go briefly through the goals of the CBCs. For those of you who are new to MEF, is a fairly new committee established 18 months ago. Really started out through discussion, which we were having at the LSO committee at the time, realizing that between the LSO committee, which is a highly technical group of architects, software developers, people coming in from all walks of life, and the board of directors at the MEF, we were perhaps missing an interface of commercially minded people, product people, to put together to establish a number of priorities for the LSO committee to work on. So very much aligned with the 3.0 strategy, the MEF 3.0 strategy that Pascal presented or represented again this morning. Two of the goals of the CBC define and drive the strategy roadmap and plan for the development of global federated automated supply chain for the service providers. And as a goal, that's a mouthful, but really fostering, supporting the adoption of automation throughout the MEF 3.0 framework, and beyond that, also facilitating, supporting the automation of buying and selling of ICT services between service providers and service providers as well as their enterprise customers. That's.
I'll come back and ask you some questions a little bit later. And I'm going to ask Chris to talk about the DSC.
Hey everyone, so this morning there was a big debate on what SASE means and is SASE going away and such, and that is exactly the problem that the Digital Service Committee seeks to solve. Initially, when a new technology comes out in the market, such as SASE or SD-WAN, et cetera, the terminology is ill-defined. Everyone has a different definition of what it means. There's no clear agreements in place. And every time you try to build, and everyone's building a custom solution for it and trying to sell it into their marketplace. And every sale is an education session with the customer to try to explain what that digital service is. As long as that's true, the industry can't scale. So SASE right now is in a place where it's just at that hype cycle where it's sexy and interesting, but at the same time, extremely difficult to define what it means. SD-WAN was like that a couple of years ago, and it's come a long way as a result of the work of the Digital Services Committee. And that was exactly the same conversations we were having about carrier Ethernet 15, 20 years ago. That it's ill-defined, et cetera. So the way that Digital Service Committee solves this is by defining an abstract definition of the service, essentially the agreement between the service provider and the enterprise customer or subscriber, and describing how that service works, defining what needs to be agreed upon, and the attributes in such a way that it in no way describes what's going on inside the service provider. It's just defining the service interface between the two. And that clear abstraction makes it dramatically easier to sell to the customers, to make sure that two different people that are doing the same thing use the same terminology, et cetera. And it's essential for the industry scale. That's the first thing that we do. And we then pass that on to the LSO committee so that they can then make sure that that can be quoted and ordered and delivered and assured. And the certification committee then is there to certify vendors and service providers to make sure that it's compliant with that specification, et cetera. That's the first thing that we do. And then we're often involved in defining how to measure the performance of that service on an ongoing basis for assurance purposes, or defining, for example, service activation test, that after I've activated the service for a particular customer, what is the test to prove that the service is working as specified, so that the enterprise customer can then take and hand over the traffic. So that's the main objective. It's really to just dramatically simplify, clarify, get consistent terminology for the services being sold by service providers, being sold by cloud, et cetera. And we'll do this for transport services such as optical services, for IP services, for Ethernet services, SD-WAN, SASE, for Zero Trust, and infrastructure as a service right now are all projects that are underway right now.
Great, Chris.
Okay.
Karthik, the veteran from Melsar.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah. So actually, like somehow we just started in the right order, so that's good. So like they mentioned, LSO committee, we basically are in the business of developing interface specifications and processes that allow for seamless interaction across the LSO interface reference points. So what does that mean? So this is a committee that actually develops the API specifications. But it's not just the API specifications. We also develop some additional documentation that we call business requirements and use cases. So this is the value add, like you would have heard throughout the morning, like where Pascal and others have been mentioning that MEF provides something more than APIs. And this is what happens in the LSO committee. It's not just APIs, it's business requirements, use cases that define the processes, how you should use the APIs. When you have certain attributes, what are they supposed to mean? When do you pass it around? And then a developer guide that goes with it. Now that's one part of it. And these APIs are for various business functions like order, quoting, address validation, and so on. Service ordering or service OEM. And apart from that, we also develop schemas for products and services that MEF has been working on, that DSC has been working on. Right? So the DSC specifications actually define what a service, a carrier Ethernet service or an IP service should contain. We actually encode that into actual schemas that you can pass over the wire, like JSON schemas and so on. Right? So the LSO committee kind of does the technical work that's basically actually initiated in CBC and then sort of find a little bit solidified in DSC. And then we just package it all and so that you can actually implement it. Over to you, Charles.
All right. So so you've heard about the way we define the services and the APIs and how those flow naturally, and they're fantastic, but they don't really do you much good if they're just specifications or just APIs and no one actually adopts them and deploys them. So the Test and Certification Committee, we really accelerate that deployment and the adoption of these services and of the APIs. And the way we do that, one of the primary things we do is we take these specifications and we look at what are the testable requirements that are within them. And so we come up with those test plans and we use that to drive the certification then, so that you can really prove when you say you offer a given MEF service, you can be certified that you actually provide it as defined. Or when you're a vendor and you have equipment, you can certify that that equipment, if configured a certain way, can operate such that it provides this MEF service. So that's a key part of what we do. But it's also very important that all of us understand what these services are and the key aspects of them and the terminology. And so another thing we do is we work on the training and the professional certification. That's certifying of people that they understand and have the knowledge of what the MEF SD-WAN service is, or eventually when we have the SASE services, so that individuals can actually get certified. And then, when you're working with a partner, do they actually have people who are certified as being knowledgeable of these MEF services? And then one of the relatively newer things for us is the OIT program that you heard a little bit about, and you'll hear more. That's really focused on the APIs and helping you get to the point where you're ready to certify. How can you make sure that your APIs are working? How can you do some interop testing? How can you verify that you're acting as defined? And that's what the OIT program platform really lets you do. Take your solution and develop it, improve it over time so that you're ready to go forward and do the certification later on.
Thank you. Just a couple of points. Nan was talking this morning about the accomplishments over the last 2.5 years, and I think there's a couple of sort of heralded, not so sexy things that this group has led. What we've been able to accomplish is a very rigorous and consistent process for developing standards, regardless of which committee it's coming out of. We have a standards development process, and on top of that, and it's not just the chairs that have led this. There's a number of people in this room that I see their faces here that put a lot of energy into making sure that we got it right. At the same time, though, everybody knows that we're operating in a very fast-paced world, so we can't have processes and procedures that take us too long to get these things to market. So I think there's been a lot of flexibility and give and take to make sure that we're able to bring the work out faster, as agile as possible. You'll see some of that, in action this week. And all of the committees have really, I think, very, very substantially progressed the work that they've undertaken and the efficiency by which it's been managed and undertaken. So kudos to you, all of the other chairs. I have the pleasure of having a monthly call with the chairs, the senior leadership on the staff side, and we work as a very harmonious unit. It's great to see. So I want to come back to the CBC. Just another comment on the CBC. One of the challenges we had over time was these, the DSC and the LSOC and TCC is pretty specialized, but they're largely fairly technical committees, especially DSC and LSOC. And we found that we kind of lost a home for product management, product marketing people, the increasing need for commercial expertise coming in, of course, with the API work. And we want to try to use the CBC to create that home. So maybe a couple of things, Laurent, who's participating today in the CBC with that, stated objective in mind, and what's on the slate for this week? Like, what's the big deal?
Yeah, sure. So
now I'm going to put you on. There is going to be a big deal, right? It's going to be a big thing that happens.
Yeah, there is lots of big deal. Always lots of big deal at MEF, especially at quarterly meetings. So with participating, from what we've seen really from the past few meetings, is really an hybrid, a mix of people coming in from with a technical expertise as well as product managers, and trying to come up with a blend of the right representation of people here, participating, supporting into the prioritization work which we are doing at the CBC. Some of the outcomes from the past few months, what we work on is the SD-WAN North Star document, where led by Mohit, one of the fellow co-chair at the CBC, is coming up with the specification, the definition of SD-WANs. Really, the original goal was to get a common language across the industry, of probably for the benefits of customers, for the benefits of, again, commercial people, of what represents SD-WAN, and we've just achieved that. The next step, and really talking to Karthik at the LSO committee, will be how do we operationalize SD-WAN? How do we make sure that from a quote-to-cash standpoint, we have every single aspect of the delivery of an SD-WAN product standardized? And that's going to be a big undertaking and something for us to work on. The second aspect, and really leading on to the LSO Partner Conference, which is taking place tomorrow, is bringing in through the means of two tracks, both business and the implementation track. Again, all of these experts across the industry, all the MEF members present in the room here and also virtually, to agree on a set of roadmap items for us to prioritize over the course of the next few quarters. I think it's important. We have Pascal's roadmap as a CTO, and that's critical for us as a reference point to use some of our decision over the course of the next year or so. But we also need full engagement from the membership for them to provide us feedback. And finally, the third area, and that's more of an ongoing initiative project which has kicked off last year or a year ago, is the collaboration with between MEF and MOBI through the specific smart contracts and blockchain for the automotive industry. So MOBI being a body bringing together many car manufacturers, car hardware providers, people involved with the life cycles of car and the automation. So a project led, and I'm turning to my right, by Antonella at Sparkle over the past years, has been to bring up the integrated trust network, supporting the connected vehicles, supporting the decentralized identity for vehicles, as we're seeing increasingly a lot of demands for the vehicles life cycle to be controlled from a decentralized fashion, and where really the blockchains come into play in that specific framework. So these are the three areas of focus for the CBC, not only this week, but over the course of the next, between now and the end of the year, let's say.
Yeah, probably should have noted that the LSO Partner Conference is essentially something that was driven by the CBC.
Yeah, primarily, initially.
The staff side, but also we haven't talked about it too much yet, the LSO API marketplace, that was conceived. So, and you know what we get, especially for new member companies or where there's new participants, and they see, interest, or they have interest, see value across all the different MEF areas of work. Sometimes they're wondering, where do we start? And increasingly, we're saying, maybe your lead person coming into MEF might be on the product side, and maybe you want to go into the CBC, and that's a good sort of gateway. And then you can start to drill into what the other committees are doing, see what's relevant to you, what's not, and then bring other people in the organization. So it's sort of part of the onboarding model that we've been trying to, formalize a little bit more. So I'll just keep going. Chris, anything spectacular happening with the DSC this week? You guys do the not so sexy, the connectivity services standards. All the APIs are getting all the airtime here and stuff.
Yeah, well,
but SD-WAN, I guess you're getting some.
SD-WAN, cybersecurity, and infrastructure as a service are all big areas. So obviously, we started with connectivity services first, and they have become very mature, and the standards are very mature, et cetera. And there's always tweaks, to improve the IP service definitions or to improve the Ethernet service definition. I don't think there's even any work going on Ethernet right now. All of our work now are on the new services that's coming out. It's about SD-WAN, it's about cybersecurity, zero trust, SASE, and and we've just last meeting started a project on infrastructure as a service, so cloud.
So you don't services. Think we need another 70 or 80 carrier Ethernet standards?
Oh, they'll hopefully we don't get to quite that many in these, but the truth is that those ones are very ill-defined. Those are the ones that are where there's most industry excitement, but at the same time, all kinds of industry confusion. And so that's what we're focused on right now. So I think on the SD-WAN side, we're working on 70.2, the third definition of the SD-WAN services. We're working on Universal SD-WAN Edge, which today every vendor SD-WAN solution essentially needs bookended solutions on all sides. And this is the first time getting in where you could actually have some vendor interoperability. So that you don't have to put an edge at every location for each vendor. And then, and so those are probably the top two in SD-WAN. On cybersecurity, we've got both the Zero Trust and SASE underway. And on infrastructure as a service, we're going to have the first review of the work that's been underway for defining infrastructure as a service, which today is a really interesting one because, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Alibaba, they've already defined their services. And they're already widely deployed, and they're already widely different. And it's causing a lot of industry challenges, and it's going to become that much more challenging when you go to edge compute, and now there are thousands of sites that are in play. And so that work, I think, is just getting started, but I think it's going to be a really important area for us going forward.
Great stuff. Perfect.
Okay, let me start off with what we achieved this quarter and where we are.
Perfect.
So many of you may already be aware, like, we released like 3 SDK releases, and we have another SDK release planned end of this month, like called Dolly. So the APIs have been out for some time, but in this quarter, we actually have standardized 5 APIs. And what that means is we have finalized and we think they're mature enough to call them a MEF standard. Right, so it was an evolution. It was like Kevin, you mentioned, we needed to be agile. So we took, like, we didn't follow the typical standardization process. We put stuff out in the market and we saw how the folks implemented, got feedback from the implementation teams. And now we have standardized 5 APIs like code, product offering qualification, address validation, inventory, to name few. So the next 2 that we are working to finalize is a product order and trouble ticket. And on Thursday, we have editing sessions on those 2 in the mornings. And then, like, following that, like what's coming up in the pipeline is product catalog. So these are the product APIs. At the same time, like, we found, like, from CBC and Pascal that there's a focus now on operationalization. So we are working on the service APIs like service order, service inventory, service OEM, performance management, service function testing. So all of this work is now ongoing. For this API part, on the payload side, because MEF's got a lot of background in carrier Ethernet, we are standardizing the product models, the schemas, for access C-line and subscriber Ethernet. And, like, we did some pre-work on the IP internet access, which is like basic and advanced. And we have a project proposal in this quarterly meeting that we are going to vote to make it an official project. So it doesn't mean the work is not done. It's just now, like, we are just sort of taking a little bit like an agile approach where we did pre-work. Actually, with the CBC, we organized an workshop with all the service providers, and, like, they sort of had a survey where they took out, like, all the important internet access attributes they would be interested from a commercial perspective. All the work has been done in the DSC, but, like, there were, like, how much, like, I don't know, for 48 or more attributes. And then, so we had to sort of prioritize to say, okay, these attributes are more relevant to the commercial side of when you're negotiating commercial contracts, and these are more technical attributes, and that this can go at the service layer, this at the product layer. So we have done that work. Now we have just launched the internet access project. We'll be launching this quarter, and soon, like, probably, like, maybe in Dolly, we'll have the pre-standard versions of this that you can start using, provide us feedback.
I make a joke about Ethernet standards and so on, but, one of the understated accomplishments of this organization, if you think about it, started working on Ethernet standards, carrier Ethernet, 20 years ago. And that very, very comprehensive work, creating extremely flexible standards, has really future-proofed those services for service providers. If you look at, they're capable, they're automation, orchestration ready, they're dynamic capable, they can support a whole bunch of forward-looking use cases. So 20 years later, now we're putting, the pieces in place to do full automation.
Yeah.
But the standards work was so comprehensive and contemplated how operators would use this in so many different ways. I think the industry, still probably uses, most implementations are relatively vanilla from what I can see. But that's not always the case. But I think it's quite interesting that if you invested, if you built on MEF standards, you certified your services and your people, and you had MEF expertise, that is very, very relevant, going forward as we look at the challenges ahead that we've been talking about here for the course of the week or the day, in any case. So with that little sideshow, I'll turn it back over to Charles.
Right. So, I guess our top priority really is to figure out what our top priorities are. You heard about all of the services that are being defined. There's a lot of great work around SD-WAN, around SASE. We have these 5 new APIs that are all standardized now. And so for us, there's of course a lot more work for the committee to do than we really can do. So we need to figure out, it's a little bit of a prioritization. Do we focus on carrier Ethernet and even some of the small incremental advancements that have happened there? Is it worthwhile to have a new certification of that, both professional and of the services? Or what about all you've heard about with SD-WAN? Our current certification is based on MEF-70, but MEF-70.1 is out now. Are we ready? Does the market, would it really benefit a lot from that certification? So we're having discussions like that. And that's one big thing we want to make sure we accomplish. The other big thing, though, is we've been working remotely, basically virtually, for 2 years. And so we really want to take advantage of the fact that we're all here together. So we've compressed our agenda to just the Thursday morning. And we want to leave a lot of time to work across with the other committees, because as you heard, there's a lot of, we're relying on each other, right? In terms of, so it's important that we sit in some of those DSC sessions and the LSO sessions, and CBC sessions, that we have that cross-pollination of ideas. And that was very challenging to do virtually. And now that we're here in person, we want to really take advantage of that. So I'd say that's our other really big item for this meeting.
Now, one of the challenges that we discuss all the time is the need for more contributions, right? I think we have, everybody's heard of the 80-20 rule. I think we're like the 90-92-8 rule or something here, where 92% of the work is done by about 8% of the member contributors and some staff and contractors and so on. So what should, if someone, and when we bring new members on board, we're trying to put a more structured process to get them engaged into specific areas of work and steer them in the right direction. Lisa, in a few minutes, is going to talk about some tool improvements we're doing. If someone's interested in your respective work areas, what would be their starting point? Should they ping you guys and have a call with the chairs? Is there something you recommend to get things, make it, we're trying to make it easy as possible for people to jump in and make it not too onerous, right?
Yeah, I would say always start with the chairs, ping the chairs first. That's what we are here, sort of to orient you, see what is the interest, what's the expertise, what are the projects which we have going, and then we can take it from there. I mean, that's maybe the easiest way.
You gotta figure out which projects you want to participate in first. Because like Nan said, there's 62 projects. You can't come into the MEF and participate in all of them. You have to decide on the ones that are relevant to you, where you've got some expertise or some interest, and then and go through us to find that, and then jump in. Yeah, and CBC
we try to do quite a bit on the front end when we're
right. At the same time, we can guide all towards the right committee, the right projects, etc.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Absolutely. And there's no process. It can be very informal, coming up to us, a chat, a coffee, anything.
And two comments on
coffee, maybe drinks later.
Maybe a bit.
Okay?
Yeah, actually, it really helps. I already identified a few potential contributors yesterday. Just by having drinks and talking to people in the corridor.
Yeah, you got to follow up with them, because you know what happens. A lot of stuff gets said over drinks.
They may not know it, but
I'm going to help with this. I'm going to help with that.
So everybody who's had a drink with me yesterday just expect me to follow up.
And just as a sales pitch for those who are considering contributing, for me, it's been one of the most rewarding things I've done. Especially some of the work I did in the early LSO committee. When I start seeing the adoption going on, the impact on the industry and stuff, there's so many projects I did that turned into nothing. But this one is actually meaningful in terms of what's happening. So, I think there's real opportunity to do some work that actually helps progress the industry forward. So, definitely worth jumping in.
And these guys have to compete for these jobs too. They're actually competing to come into MEF and do a whole bunch of work, right? And we, about 4 years ago now, we introduced a competition for chairs, and they have to resubmit every year to prove to us what they've done, and we open it up to, you'll see a competition being opened, I think in May, sometime later this month. I forget the exact date. It's our annual competition for chairs. You'll also see the board of directors elections being announced. I don't think I put that slide up, but special mention, these guys are great and they do a lot of work. But we also thank their companies, right? Because their companies have blessed the fact that they're going into MEF and they're spending, a specific amount of time. And I know, you guys some of you have ran other committees before. You moved over to get the job done where it needed to be done. So a lot of flexibility there. So look, these guys have been outstanding, and I think a round of applause for them would be ideal for what they've done. Thank you. Any questions before we just hit our wrap-up session? There's one by Mark over there. You can shout, or you can. Oh, I've got stereo mics here.
So with the expansion of the number of services, as we see, connectivity is emerging and evolving into the overlays, and then now we have cybersecurity and so forth. I think I want to challenge the chairs and challenge the MEF to come back and relook at some of the standards that we have, and then put them through the commercial filter of the operators that are in this room, so that we can maybe pare down the number of activities that are, or at least reprioritize the number of activities, just to make sure that we have something that's viable. Because I'm concerned, and our company is concerned about adoption of these standards and what those timetables are. Because they do, in the case of the Test and Certification Committee, they drive real investments. It's not just a paper standard from by the time it reaches what, Devesh and Charles's committee. So I really want to come back and really think about how we can prioritize.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll take that one, because that is probably one of the top priorities that even I mentioned, but I'll talk about a little bit more with the Test and Certification Committee. We have sessions planned for Thursday where we really want to do that, because I agree. It's there's one of the nice things about MEF is anyone can bring work into it, and if you have to get a set of contributors willing to do the work, but then you can put that work forward, whether it's a widely called for and popular use case, or it's something that really is maybe a little more niche. But we can't do everything, and we certainly can't test and certify everything. So that's very important to us, and it's a hard thing to figure out. But by having all of us here in person and being able to meet not only in the scheduled times, but in between sessions and working across committees, I think we can go a long way towards figuring that out. So yeah, we're definitely looking at that as an important thing to do.
Let me add one more thing. So in LSO committee, we are trying out a new process where, we are entering all the user stories in Jira. We are working with CBC on that to prioritize those user stories. So actually any member can, eventually we'll get to a point where any member can enter user stories. And every quarter, we do sort of an poll, automated poll, where you survey a poll, where you prioritize those user stories. Now it's not binding, but at least it gives us a clear indication of where the interest is in terms of priorities. So again, when I use the word user stories, some folks, API architects and so on, understand what it is. But that's where we may want to even educate MEF membership on, user stories, a small blurb, 3 lines, 4 lines description of what they want it to get solved, right? But a little bit lower down, not high level, but not too much detail, but not too vague on, say, I want an ability to be able to match address validations or something of that sort, and then we prioritize that every quarter. So we are trying that out. It's not a process yet. It's sort of an incubation phase, but that's something that might help.
And also, I think through the mean of the weekly calls, very naturally, very organically, you see by getting the level of contribution and large attendance on some of the calls against others, you can very, very quickly come up to a level of prioritization where essentially the industry, where the MEF membership is rallying behind a number of key initiatives. And very naturally, your prioritization is coming through the weekly call, through the weekly engagement that we are seeing week in, week out.
Yeah, just what projects come to be. And I think the most important thing that we all have to keep in mind all the time is adoption. As long as everything you're working on is driven and you expect it to be adopted because there's real value in the industry, then you're working on the right stuff. If you think that you're not sure how that's going to be adopted, then, that's when you got to start doing the reprioritization exercise. But it does happen organically, which is why we're hardly working on any connectivity stuff anymore, right?
Yeah, and the next session I'll touch on some of the formal things we're doing to measure adoption for that reason. But just to close on the point, we're a member-driven organization. We're not a private company. We're an association, right? And there were lots of discussions around this. We've tried to strike the balance between having a member, like a top-down technical vision, a work vision, which has been, members contributed to, reviewed, to help us guide our work, and ideally people will align to that work. But we're member-driven, and people have ideas, and they may want to start a project, and so we try to make sure that the processes are there, that if there's not enough support for this thing, it doesn't go forward, or we don't put contractors on to accelerate. It's not perfect, by any stretch, and there's always the challenges to not squash down things that may not appear to be the highest priority, right? But that's the balance I think we try to take. Listen, thank you very much, guys. Appreciate the input, and good luck with your sessions this week.
Thank you.
Cool.